Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming on this beautiful but windy day. I'm really excited about today's program here at the Urban Art Space, and I want to thank the wonderful staff here at the Urban Art Space for not only hosting this exhibition, Beyond Guilt, for an extended amount of time here, but also for the care and attention and care that you've given to this project, which is so important. So my name is Jennifer Suchland. I am an associate professor at Ohio State University, and I have had the true honor and joy to collaborate with the Ohio Justice and Policy Center on the Beyond Guilt project. And today we have a wonderful lineup of speakers who are going to be talking about sort of life after, and life after incarceration, but also experience of women and femmes in prison and the specific experiences that they have. So that will be our focal point today. Let me introduce our panel. So to my far left is Virginie Adelanian, attorney and director of the Second Chance Project. She provides legal services, outreach, and education, specializing in the legal needs resulting from human trafficking and a variety of civil legal issues arising from victimization. Additionally, Virginie is an adjunct professor at Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio, where she teaches classes focusing on human trafficking and criminal justice to graduate students in the Applied Behavioral Sciences Master's Program. Next to her is LaToya Bell, who is Deputy Director of OJPC, and recently joining OJPC in 2022. Prior to joining OJPC, LaToya served as the Municipal Chief for the Hamilton County Clerk, where she managed the largest clerk of courts division. While working as public defender in Maryland and Kentucky, as well as serving as the senior staff attorney managing the Workers' Rights Clinic with the Washington Lawyers Community for Civil Rights, she has been rooted in always addressing social justice issues. And then finally here to my left is Michelle Robinson. She is Community Outreach Coordinator at the Urban League of Greater Southwestern Ohio. Michelle is a mother, a grandmother, a community advocate, and a Beyond Guilt storyteller. Thank you all for joining, for all coming together. So we talked a bit a couple of weeks ago about what we would be discussing today. We have some talking points, but we also want to allow audience questions. And so I hope you will, if you have questions along the way or want an elaboration, to go ahead and raise your hand. We can make this a little bit informal as well and have it be dialogical. So the first point we'd like to talk about, and you all can take turns, and we can make it dialogical up here as well, is perhaps some of you know this already, but while there are more men incarcerated than women in the United States, women are the fastest growing incarcerated population in the United States. I believe it's something like 500% that it has grown in terms of rate of incarceration. And so what we'd like to talk about today is why. What are the on-ramps, specifically that are stemming from the experiences that women, and I think what I mean, at least when I hear the word women, I think of people who are assigned female at birth, and also people who are self-identifying as women. So what are the experiences of women and femmes in the system, and what are the on-ramps? Why are they finding themselves increasingly incarcerated? So I'd like to pass it over to Regine if you want to get started. Or
Sure. I particularly see this in my work with survivors of human trafficking. When I get asked, why would survivors have a criminal record? Why is that even relevant when we're talking about their victimization? We have to remember that at the very bare minimum, survivors of human trafficking, they are being exploited for some kind of gain, whether that be financial or material. So when a trafficking survivor has that experience and they end up in the system, often my clients self-identify and say, I've been treated as an offender first and a victim second. It doesn't matter if I was a victim of domestic violence, doesn't matter that I was a victim of an unstable home. When I enter the system, I have a number, I'm an offender. So after that experience, when they do try to get help, they come to OJPC, even the way that they tell their story is difficult for them because they have to get out of that mind space of telling their story as a quote-unquote offender and self-identifying and recognizing victimization. So I think first and foremost, the way that our clients see themselves, understand their own story, and be able to communicate to an advocate who wants to help is one of the biggest challenges that I face in my role.
I think one of the things that has contributed to an increase in women in the criminal legal system is just the uptick in criminalizing behavior for everyone that wasn't previously criminalized. And so I'm old, and I remember when I was in college, you saw an uptick in women in the 80s and 90s as the crack epidemic exploded. And so what happened was you saw the punishment of addicts and addiction, where now it's more treatment focused, and that swept up a lot of women into the criminal legal system. I think, again, we're criminalizing addiction, we criminalize mental health, and naturally you just saw an increase in women being incarcerated and having contacts with the legal system, and specifically parenting. And so, again, there was a point in time where corporal punishment was acceptable in the household and in school. And even if you're against it, if you look at the numbers, most women are raising children. And so you can see women now filing themselves in the criminal legal system by how they parent. There has even been a case recently in Hamilton County where a woman has been charged for the second time for the death of her child for co-sleeping. And again, I understand it was a tragic situation the first time, but if I'm honest, I co-slept with my daughter, and I can't imagine being punished for a lifestyle choice. So criminalizing things that wasn't criminal and not necessarily criminal is unfortunately causing an uptick and increase in women involved in the legal system and ultimately incarcerated.
With me being a felon inmate myself and having a 18 to life sentence, being inside and seeing women come inside with life sentences is very heartbreaking to me, because a lot of them are from the ages of 21 to 27 now. And I believe it's because of, like she just said, the upbringing in a household. With me working for the Urban League and going out into the top 10 communities, I be around a lot of displaced children and mothers in need of help because they are raising their kids by themselves. So therefore, these young men and these young ladies that's out here raising themselves, basically, they run to the streets, and what's in the streets? Nothing but trouble.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit more in terms of, but why is there now, I mean, because some of these activities that people are being picked up for have always been there, right? And so, Latoya, you mentioned the war on drugs, right? And that was a specific policy that criminalized possession and disproportionately affected certain communities. But I wonder, in terms of more recent uptick, right? What can account for the fact that you have more women being incarcerated now, for example, in like the last 10 years? And I'm specifically also interested with this question with Regine and your work with the Human Trafficking Court, or with human trafficking survivors, is that that we have this new language of human trafficking, and that has been very helpful in terms of people having their experiences validated, right, and actually to be seen as people who deserve services, right? That also means that there's greater attention to finding potential victims of trafficking. So I wonder, is that perhaps an opportunity where some people are being found, potential victims, but then other people are being picked up along the way, or other kinds of dynamics that you see in terms of this?
Back to the war on drugs, I mean, I think the demographic changed, and so that's why you saw, especially with the heroin epidemic, you started to see more white women who were mothers incarcerated, so that, again, the demographic changed, the drug of choice changed. I think also what's criminalized, you're starting to see, there was a period where I grew up in the in the 80s, and I remember the movie The Burning Bed. And so you've now seen more women, victims of domestic abuse, not being able to have their issues addressed properly through the courts or even acknowledged through police and law enforcement, and then they're re-victimized until they act out. And so you're seeing more women going to prison for violent crimes, probably as a reaction to being a victim of abuse in the past, not getting treatment in the past, not getting mental health issues addressed. And so that's another reason. The same problems, but I think the demographic has changed, or increased, I should say.
To build on what LaToya said, our system is becoming more and more reactive and not responsive. So you mentioned, human trafficking is a bit more mainstream now. It's the topic that we're hearing more and more in our news and in our culture. But that doesn't necessarily mean we are understanding it the way that it actually is, which is complicated. It's not black and white. There is not always a perfect victim. There's not always a perfect perpetrator. So what makes it troubling when there's a topic that is more popular and more interesting to the public is we do box in people to be a certain kind of victim and make sure that they don't ever mess up even after their victimization. We like the perfect happy ending, and human trafficking often doesn't have that happy ending. So when we do have survivors who may have been victims at a certain period in their life, but because of the journey that they were on, other things started happening that, they may think, well, I'm not, I've done bad things too. Like, surely the system's not here to help me. So when we are trying to help survivors, we have to keep in check our own biases and the stereotypes that we're constantly pushing forward, because we're pushing actual victims to the margins if they don't fit the box that we've created for them or the definition that is convenient for us as a society. I think that can trickle into other aspects of talking about the criminal legal system, but particularly for human trafficking, the more attention we give certain groups of people, the more we're pushing others out, and we need to be mindful of that.
Do you have anything you want to add?
As far as the women are concerned about going to prison, I have been watching this TV show called For My Man, and a lot of women goes to prison because of trying to please a man because they don't know their self-worth. And I have to admit, I didn't know my self-worth before I went to prison. I had to learn who I was while I was inside there. I had no clue who Michelle was because Michelle was out here selling drugs, smoking drugs, doing everything. I didn't have no clue. And until a woman learns and finds out who she is and her self-worth, and know that she don't need no one to validate who she is, it's going to keep happening. A woman needs to know their self-worth and know that they are lovable, they are smart, they're intelligent. A lot of them don't feel like that. I had a lot of bunkies in there coming in that was young, and they weren't taught women things like being on their menstrual period, how to keep up their hygiene. I had to teach a lot of them that, and it was sad to me that they didn't know this, but look how they were raised. Most of their parents were out on drugs themselves, so they had to raise themselves.
I think a lot of times, to both of their point, we have these labels now like trauma and mental health, and we're talking openly about these things now, but that wasn't always the case. We didn't have labels, we didn't have identifiers and categories. And also, by the time, and I'm a former public defender, by the time the individual landed as my client, it was too late. And so the trauma had been there all along, and there were no resources, there was no identification, there was no encouragement to get mental health counseling or addiction counseling, and so, or even conversations. A lot of these young women and older women came from families and circumstances where we didn't talk about things. Everything was swept under the rug. Some families were very religious and thought we could pray these issues away. And so a lot of the people that you see funneling into the system through acting out or committing an act that may not even be criminal, it's because they were at their breaking point, and it just, something triggered them, and they didn't get the response and the attention and the help they needed before, and now it's too late. And now, unfortunately, we think the solution is charging them and convicting them and sending them to prison.
Did you want to?
Yeah, I think we underestimate how young kids are that get targeted with situations like this, particularly like getting into the legal system. More often than not, it starts very young. My clients, at least 99% of them, they met their first trafficker when they were 12, 13, 14. So it's not an accident that certain vulnerabilities are identified and targeted. Certain traffickers can smell it in the air, like very, very literally. Every single one of my clients, they said my first trafficker, it was very easy for him because he gave me attention, or she gave me attention, made me feel valuable, made me feel like I was worth something. Like so much so, a lot of my clients have said they're school teachers who didn't care if they went back to school. If anything, encouraged them not to come back because they were failing so badly. So when we have communities and systems that actively fail our children, don't be surprised if later you see them on the news for either being exploited or pushed into the legal system where they now have contributed to breaking our own laws. So it's not an accident who ends up in prison. It's more shameful that we can identify and understand this and still do nothing about it.
Yeah. Well, I think a good next step could be to talk about this point you made, Michelle, about how you need to know your own self-worth. And so this question, I think, speaks to that. So there are increasingly these courts. So let's say someone gets arrested for XY solicitation or self-defense even, right? And there are these other side courts, and this is me, a non-legal person, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but there are these diversion courts that you can get diverted to and outside of the main sort of highway of the system. And these courts are meant to be more palliative, to be more attuned to human rights, right? So you have catch court, for example, here in Columbus. There are DV courts, domestic violence courts. So my question to you all is, these courts are attempting to see someone's self-worth, to see them as a victim, right? But I'm also, so that's a question of like, how do these courts play a role, right? Do they, in the end, do less harm than, you know, the main highway? But also, I just wonder, Michelle, like, you talk about in your stories that you shared with us about how you rehabilitated yourself, that you found your own self-worth, and that the prison didn't do that, right? And so I wonder, you know, what could happen before getting arrested? Like, what would you want in the community? What would you want to see? Like, if we took 90% of what we spend on courts and police and put it into something else, what would you like that to be?
Oh, with me going to prison for because I was on drugs, I needed somebody out in the community that could relate to me, that could talk to me, that knew my struggles. Like when I'm out there now and I run across women that I see on drugs, I know the signs, so I know how to relate and talk to them. And I have got 3 success stories of women that I've helped get off of drugs since I've been home, and so far they're doing good, and I'm thankful for that. People need someone that's in the struggle, that knows the struggle that they're going through. A person that has never did a drug a day in their life, who are you to talk to someone and help them? Because you don't know what they're going through. You don't know what's going through their mind. You don't know how they're feeling. You don't know what made them turn to it. They need someone to relate to. And if I had someone out there that was relatable to me, I think that could have stopped me a long time ago. A long time ago.
Like peer-to-peer?
Peer-to-peer, yes. And we that's something in Cincinnati that they have halfway houses, they have this, but they don't have a place where a man or a woman can go and actually sit down and get the help that they need, someone to really talk to them that understands them. You need someone to understand you in order to help you. If they don't understand what you're going through, how they gonna help you? 'Cause, 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 'cause,
I think a big thing that comes out of what Michelle said is lack of trust. By not knowing what that person has experienced, there is a lack of trust. And especially as an institution like our courts, or even me as an attorney, I know that I represent an institution where there is a long legacy of distrust and not understanding nuances of not only excessive policing, how race, gender, all the things are combined in how we have not been responsive to those needs. So when we start having these courts that are specialty dockets, I think the intention is to be good, to help, and to do good. I would only ever caution, keep your expectations low, because the first couple times might not be successful, because you are working with people who this may not be their first time in a courthouse, and this may not be the first time that anyone has been nice to them. So when we're having these specialty dockets and they want to show results, they want to show data that what they're doing is successful so they can continue having funding, let's be real. It's not that easy. We're dealing with real people, and especially with some of these programs that require 2 years of not making a mistake.
Right.
I don't remember the last time I've committed to something longer than 6 months. Aside from law school, being 3 years. So we're asking a lot of people who are in the worst time of their life, extremely vulnerable, dealing with demons and issues that I cannot relate to, but we're asking them to get it right this time and take advantage of the situation. I think that's unfair. I think that we need to be more open-minded, that we're dealing with humans who have a long experience and legacy of what they've experienced. And instead of us trying to map out what our success is by people graduating certain programs, I would consider being successful of, let's have a mentorship program. Let's continue feeding into the positivity where there's an infrastructure of peers who can help each other, and not someone like me who strolls in and tries to save the day or help somebody. I don't see myself as a savior whatsoever. I'm just a tool for my clients. So if our legal system can think a little bit more of being a tool and not the master of the situation, I think, we can do loads more good than what we're doing right now.
All the things that are wrong with the system. And the challenging thing is, and I said this before, if you ever hear me talk again, you'll hear it, is that it's not perfect and there's so many things to fix, but criminal system, immigration system, whatever system, we're trying to fix it while we're in it. It's not like we can pause it and fix it and address the issues. So trying to fix it while you're in it, actively in it, you get things like specialty courts, and they're great intention, great ideas, and like everything, not everything, but most things, it's where the execution, that's where we fall down. And what I hear Virginie and Michelle I'm talking about that's missing is like the humanization of the process. And no, we're not going to get a bench in any courthouse that's relatable to all of our clients. But I would always criticize the prosecutors in the county that I practice with for prosecuting like they're perfect. And they let perfect lies. And I knew them personally, and I knew they did not. And so we have individuals going through this system, and we're expecting perfection. I liked drug court when I was in Maryland as a public defender as an option, as opposed to having my client who was an addict serve 18 months or 5 years for addiction. I appreciate the option. But one of the problems was they had to admit to the criminal conviction to get into the drug court. And so we talked about this, like if there was a DV court, how would you get in? What am I admitting to? What wrong am I admitting to as a victim of domestic violence to get in DV court? Not just the abusers, but the victims are a part of this. And so, again, it's the execution. So with drug court, it was great because it was rooted in treatment. However, I would hear my clients say they try to keep us so busy with community service. You got to have a job. If you don't have a job, you got to be working on your GED. You also have to go to your meetings. And God forbid you have children or other obligations. And so they packed your day and they gave you calendars and they tried to force you to be responsible individuals. If you're in addiction, and some people were functioning addicts, but most of them didn't have structured days. And so now I have to have a day where it's all mapped out. I have appointments and I got to see a probation officer or make a phone call, or I get violated and kicked out of the program. At the end of the day, how helpful is that really for this person in addiction? And so good intentions, but execution was poor. And so it's not a perfect system. What else can we offer? And it's the time and resources. We're trying to do a one-size-fits-all. My biggest complaint with the criminal justice system is that it's like industrialized fast food justice, in and out in 5 minutes. And that's not realistic, because my problem may take 2 hours to get to, why hers could be 3 days. And we want a docket that's open and closed, and we're on to the next one. And we try cases like that. We sentence people like that. We're not ever really getting to the root issue of how this person got into the system in the first place.
That's it.
Yeah. So before we talk about the collateral consequences of incarceration, I'd like to spend a moment talking specifically about experience within the system, within prison. Because probably many of you have heard this phrase that incarceration is a process of dehumanization, and that people aren't treated as humans. You'll see that in many of the stories from the storytellers out front. But I think there's also an opportunity to be more specific here, that I think that incarceration also includes something specific around gender. And not to say that obviously everybody has a gender, so it's not exclusive to women's prisons, but I do think that this is something that is less talked about. And also thinking about how gender intersects so closely with race and ethnicity, because even just thinking about how Black girls are adultified in society, or how they're treated in schools and in communities. And so that carries into the prisons in terms of how people are treated on the inside. So there's so many things to talk about there, and I wonder if you could elaborate on, what's the experience like, and how do these issues play a role?
Well, every officer in there are not bad. They have some good ones there that are there to help and treat you like you are a human. Some of them realize that they have mothers, sisters, daughters, so they try to help those that I felt like they see that really want to help themselves. If you're not in there trying to help yourself, the officers are not going to try to help you at all. If they see you out there just doing whatever, getting in trouble, go to a hole, getting into fights, they don't want to help you because they feel like you're a lost cause. But if they see you doing something positive in there, a lot of them will be behind you. Marysville, ORW and DCI are two totally different prisons. ORW is mostly Caucasian. DCI is mostly African American. That runs it. So the difference in the way that you are treated, being an African American in Marysville, they let you know who you are, what you are, that you're nothing but an inmate. Your name means nothing. It's nothing but your number. You're nothing but a number to them. Even though ORW has more programs and more things to do and to help women change their lives and rehabilitate themselves, they give them more things to do than DCI. But DCI, I guess because I'm African American, I related and got more from them because they treated me like I was human. They didn't treat me like I was just a number like they did in ORW. But DCI needs help because they don't have the programs that ORW has. Most of the time, and we'll be just talking about that, there has not been not one woman who has went to the parole board and got out their first time. No matter how good you were, no matter how good your institutional record was, no matter how many programs you took, you could have been and did everything possible and they still will flop you. They still will give you more time. And the difference with DCI, and I don't know if this is how I see it because I still talk to women from both. Women in DCI get more parole time added to their sentence than the women at Marysville because they have done more. The women at DCI, they don't have enough to do, so they tell them, you have to go do this. Well, how am I going to do this when they don't even offer this to me? So you trying to tell me I have to leave this institution, go to another institution to get what I want in order for you to let me go home? That's what they're saying.
And it's not like college. It's not like I can request a transfer to the institution
Right.
with the better programming. So they are just in a no-win situation constantly. I've never been incarcerated, and it's not because I'm perfect. I've done things and probably not gotten caught, if we're being honest, but I just don't know how I could handle it. Would I do it? I do my best to do the time and not let it do me. But emotionally, I just can't imagine having somebody else in control of my life. That is
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, telling you when to do everything. Oh,
that is the only thing that's probably stopped me from not doing something and laying in prison, is having to have them in control so much. And I was having a conversation about life on the inside with a friend of mine who is a female, and one of the things we talked about is just as moms, we're both moms, and she is an attorney now, and the visit. And so I have grown up with incarcerated relatives, going to see my uncles in prison. I know the visit, and this is probably the first time I'm saying this publicly, but it felt like a field trip to us. We would go and we would have our coins for the vending machine, and this is traumatic, but this is how we normalize my uncles being in prison. We knew we were going to take photos, so this was like a big to-do to us. And it was different for me because I was leaving my uncle. But I can't imagine, and my friend talked about this, the child leaving their mom and how that visit sits with the mom after that, and they're in that cell. And I have another close friend who gave birth in prison, and I gave birth. I'm a mom, and it's not fun. And I can't imagine what that was like to go through incarcerated. And so again, I think there are just elements about women in prison that, are overlooked. Michelle mentioned the hygiene. Can you imagine young women going in and having to experience all the changes from menstruation to menopause, incarcerated in a place where you're barely getting basic needs met, and now you're going through all these emotional and physical changes with no support, but the other women in there who've gone through it with you. And so there's so much to be thought about and discussed as we talk about women on the inside.
Just in general, the dehumanization of somebody who's experiencing the criminal legal system, even before. I just think of my clients when they do have traffickers. They often tell me how they almost develop a sixth sense of knowing what they can and can't do to make sure their trafficker's mood stays steady. Because if their mood gets bad things happen to them. So I feel like that sixth sense just rolls into being in front of a judge. What's the mood of the judge? What's going to happen to me moving into incarceration? What's the mood of the CEO? What's the mood of my fellow incarcerated people? I have to constantly survive, and I'm not thriving in my own freedom. And that continues on even after incarceration. I've had clients who've been out 25, 30 years, and they still have to actively tell themselves, like, no, I don't have to just react to the environment. I don't have to people please. I don't have to say yes if I want to say no. There's been several times where I've had to develop a sixth sense for my client's sixth sense, thinking, are you doing this because you think I want to? Like, we can step back, we can slow down. How do you actually feel about this? I'm cool if you want to pause for 3 months. Nothing changes in my life, but it might change yours. So just that institutionalizing of people, taking away that free will, taking away that even self-understanding of, like, what do I want to do today? That didn't start in prison for a lot of my clients. That started even as children, if they had volatile parents, if they had unstable homes, schools that didn't care for them. We shouldn't have people who have to develop a sixth sense to know how to keep their surroundings stable so they don't get hurt. So this doesn't stop in prison. I say this gets exacerbated in prison, and it doesn't end when somebody leaves prison. If anything, that would require rewiring, reprogramming, and that may or may not happen no matter how much therapy somebody gets.
Well, they have abuse in prison.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes.
Oh, yeah.
They have girlfriends that abuse each other.
COs.
COs verbally abuse you. if you get into a fight and a CO has to break up a fight, and it's that CO who does not like you, they're going to get their lick in. They're going to get it in. They're going to get it in.
Well, even the relationships in prison, because they're not allowed to have relationships, they can't even say anything if someone's treating them badly.
Right. So they're getting beat behind doors. And then they have friends that they tell, then the friends, then you get into an argument, then it's a whole big thing, and then if you're one of the ones who does not like getting in trouble, you would do anything you can to stay out of trouble, and if that causes getting beat up in behind closed doors or getting your CO verbally abusing you, so you're not going to win against them unless you have proof, unless they know the track record of a CO.
This might be a good transition to our next prompt, but just you talked about mamas being incarcerated, and but like gender itself is a tool of harassment and shame in prison, right? I mean, you can get in trouble for masturbation, for example, in a prison, right? You're not. I mean, there's just a lot of micromanaging of the body, and so if you come in with any trauma regarding the body, then it's not in a place of healing, right? And so I wonder about this question of collateral consequences. So what happens when people get released, right? When they're returning citizens. So there's this aspect of the question that's both about the innumerable prohibitions to what you can and cannot do because of the law. There's also the human aspect of returning, right? In terms of what people need. And you talked earlier about peer-to-peer, right? And that the state isn't invested in that part of it, right? So can we talk about what people face in returning citizens, both sort of in the structural sense of what the law is prohibiting people from doing, but also what is really actually needed, what is also needed on a human level?
For me, when I came home, I had 3 years probation. It wasn't hard for me to be on probation and to do what they said, because I have been doing what somebody told me to do for 13 years. Coming out and being free was a scary situation. My first 30 to 60 days home, I found myself sitting down at count time. At count times, I found myself going to bed at a certain time because I was used to going to bed at a certain time. Going outside to just go outside and do things was weird. I didn't really want to go outside because I was afraid of what was going to happen if I went outside. If I ran into old people, what would happen? Was I strong enough to deal with old people in old places? I wanted to make sure that when I went and see my probation officer, I was ready, complete. She couldn't say anything. There was nothing to be said. And it was like, I kind of like psyched myself up to worry when I really didn't have anything to worry about, because I knew what God released me when he released me, because it was my time. I sat there and I did all the self-work to figure out and learn who I was. And it was ready for me. He was ready for me to come home because he had a mission for me, and that's now talking and trying to help other people. But everybody doesn't have that train of thought, because I have been a mentor to women coming home, and they have not adjusted to the outside world. And that goes for men too. It's hard for some people to adjust to the outside world, especially if you did a substantial amount of time. It's really man over matter and how strong you are and what you want. Basically, if you got goals, because I set goals for myself once I realized I was coming out, and if you have to, I wanted to achieve those goals, then you will continue to do what you want to do. And those people that have gotten out and went back in, I get angry at them. I get angry because I'm like, what in the world? Why? I just have no understanding, especially someone who has did 10 years or more and go right back to prison 2 or 3 years. I get so angry because I sat there for those years and I watched women come in and go out, come in and go out, and all I wanted was a chance. And now that I got my chance, I refuse to lose it. And I wish everybody else had that same thought, but I know that they don't. And I feel like if I could talk to certain women, I can get them on the same track of wanting to do something better with their life instead of going back to the old things that they did. Because if you come out here and you go around the same old people and do the same old things, you're going to get the same results. You're going to go back and do the same thing over. You got to change your mind. You got to change your thought pattern.
Got a question?
Yeah, please.
Do you think it's easier?
What's
Is
it?
it easier path to come back and do those same things than to just change your life and start moving forward? Because as an African American woman, me coming out of prison, the barriers that were placed in my path, not only am I African American woman, but I have money. So it's easier for some people to go back on those things to take the next step.
It is. It is. It is because, if it was not for OJPC, oh my goodness, I would have struggled so hard. I didn't have to struggle as hard as I did because of them, because of the help that they gave me throughout my transition coming home and me being home. That's why I want to help others, because it doesn't have to be that hard. It really don't. When, like you said, all the barriers, being a ex-con, a felon, because I'm a felon. I have a felony on my record. I'm not a felon. I have a felony on my record. And it's hard because it's hard getting a good job.
Right.
It's hard getting housing. It's hard doing a lot of things. And if there was help like I had to make it easier for people, I wish they could have it.
So it's the legal barriers, which we're talking about. You know, your criminal record becomes it's like your digital blueprint. It's like your electronic fingerprint. And so you become this piece of paper. You become these charges. They know your charges. People will know your charges and not even really know you. You know, because all you got to do is go to the Google your name or go to the clerk of courts, put in your name, and you'll see everything this person did with no context, right? So they know these words, but they don't know how you got there. And sometimes they don't know what they mean. But that will stop you from getting a job, stop you from getting housing. You know, and sex offenders can't live anywhere. But most people, when you get out, you got to have an address to register before you even get out. And where am I going to live with these convictions? Nobody wants to rent to me. Nobody wants to hire me. Driver's license. Most people got to start square one and get reinstated and don't know where to go. Life insurance. People are now turning individuals down with records for life insurance. And so you have all these legal barriers. And again, I have never been incarcerated, but we talk about this thing of institutionalization. And for me, institutionalization, it just means survival. This is how I survived in prison while incarcerated. And it becomes a bad thing because you get dinged for little things and it becomes your institutional record. And that's what people think about with institutionalization. This person doesn't stand for count. They don't make their bed. Shakedown, we found all this contraband. No, this is how I survived. But for some folks, they're institutionalized, which means they've survived so long this way. It is scary to come out and now try to survive this way, because this world looks totally different. I have clients in Beyond Guilt who have been incarcerated since the early 90s, so the internet wasn't a thing. And now they have to learn how to do everything online. Cell phones, you know, your whole life is on your cell phone. And so again, I got clients, and young. I have a client 47, but I also have clients in their 60s. We weren't all living by our cell phone when my clients went in 96 and 92, like we are now. And one of the things when they come home, we got to teach them how to do is check in with your PO, which means you got to learn how to operate this cell phone. And for some people, it's overwhelming. I'd rather go back to 3 squares and three hot and a cot. Because again, sustainability. Who's going to hire me? I got to pay rent now on a regular. I got to pay insurance. I have to pay utilities. These things are provided for me, and it's not as easy. And support. Again, if you've gone in, my uncle was lucky that my grandmother was still alive when he went in 89, he was sentenced 15 to 30 on a robbery. Not an aggravated robbery, a robbery. And a robbery that he swore he didn't commit. But he had done all these things before. They gave him 15 to 30 on this robbery. He served 12 years on that robbery. He came home in 98. My grandmother, our whole family didn't think we'd see him again. And so luckily, my grandmother did not pass until 2019. They got a good run together. But that's not the case for everybody. Some people go in, do 5 years, 10 years, and their whole family's gone. And they're coming home to nobody. And so again, I made friends that I've had longer in the institution. I don't have a family on the outside. I might decide it's easier for me to go back and survive.
And
I have made family on the inside. That I still, a young lady that I still, she's my sister. And I feel more connected to some of the women inside the prison than I do with my own family, because they don't know who I am now. I've been home almost 4 years, and my family still don't know who I am. The women inside the prison, they know me because we did every day together. And it's a struggle when you don't have support. If you have support, kudos to you, because you can make it. With no support, it's a struggle. And that's where a lot of people end up being return offenders, because they don't have the support. They don't have no one helping them and talking to them and being there for them. Everybody needs help, especially coming out of there. I don't care if you did 30 days, you need help.
Right.
You need help. And then without help, 9 times out of 10, the same results are going to happen.
And the challenges that Michelle and Latoya are talking about, they're not just private people making private decisions. These are actually laws in our books. So when Jenny brought up collateral sanctions, those are actual civil disabilities that are built into our laws that stay attached to criminal convictions indefinitely. So what that means is, even if someone is done with their time, they're done with probation, they're not on paper, they don't owe any money, they're done with their cases 20, 30, 40 years, their convictions still have these civil consequences attached to them. And these are automatic disqualifiers from certain jobs, from certain licensing. So these are not things that just go away. So as a society, are we telling people, you made a mistake, you're not as shiny as someone who's never made a mistake?
Right.
And you know, with all of the challenges that they're already experiencing personally being out, why are we creating more challenges outside of their body to make it even harder? So these are not just 1 or 2. There are over 1,000 collateral sanctions in our books right now that are attached to criminal convictions, and they can be for something as small as a petty theft. So one misdemeanor theft where someone may not have ever even gone to prison, they may not have even had jail time, they get disqualified from over 300 collateral sanctions. They cannot get a nursing license if they want to be a nurse, even if they shoplifted from a Walgreens a lipstick when they're 18. So they're not always the dramatic crimes that we hear about in the news. It could be something small. You could have been a stupid teenager, like I feel like most of us have been stupid teenagers at some point. But there are very real consequences that stick with people for life. So do we as a society even believe in redemption? And if we do, what are we actually doing about it?
Right. April is Second Chance Month. And again, part of the reason we're here is to bridge Women's History Month with Second Chance Month. And so the public is poorly educated about, relief available. And so people use the term expungement here, especially in Ohio, incorrectly. Ohio has expungement for very narrow eligible individuals. What we have is record sealing. And what it means is that it's sealed and that certain individuals can't see it. So it gets scrubbed from the clerk sites, but that doesn't mean that it's not something that can be viewed by other entities like state licensing boards. And so they'll always have access to your records. And so, it feels like there's relief, but it's not real relief. And in addition to that, most individuals aren't aware that you have to proactively seek out this relief. So I did this thing 30, 40 years ago, and now I'm a senior citizen and I want housing, and the Salvation Army gets my record and says, we can't rent to you. And it was a marijuana conviction from the 70s because, again, we criminalize things and look at things differently. And so now this 60-year-old man had to get his record sealed. Most people think like your credit report, it just goes away and falls off, and it doesn't. And you have to ask the court permission and take off a day of work or find a ride and transportation to the courthouse to get this thing from 30, 40 years ago, because you don't know when it's going to come back to haunt you. Or I'm a mom now. My mom is a grandmother. You have grandparents who want to volunteer at their kids' school, and guess what? Something I totally forgot about that I didn't think was a big deal, like, again, a marijuana conviction can prevent me from being a volunteer at my kids' school. And so, our job is to not only advocate, but to educate as well, that if you've done something, you got to find, if you're eligible for relief, and find an outlet like ours to help you apply for that relief.
I have a long-winded question. I work with people that transfer. I work with people. So, 95% of all your criminal cases are decided by communicating through a plea, right? 95% of the people who are going to come out of incarceration or conviction are going to have collateral sanctions. Let's say for a second we talk about just intervention in lieu of conviction. But we recognize we want to steer people away from incarceration, away from harmful effects. But yet we still do like intervention, but we're still going to give you the conviction. What's the difference between somebody who comes out, like what would it be like? How would your work be different if people didn't have these kinds of collateral sanctions facing them when they're released? Like even a change like they said, all right, we're no longer going to do like make people guilty. We want to defer them. They come out and they have these collateral sanctions. What does the role look like?
So one quick thing I can say that was at Maryland, a form of relief was probation before judgment. And so it's similar to in lieu of conviction. So you would plead guilty, but this actually, probation before judgment means the judge can grant you probation before he took the guilty plea. And so you're actually not convicted if you complete the period. And so you can get that, and Maryland has real expungement. You can get that seal immediately. So you're pleading guilty, but not really, because he's granting you probation. You're not even going to go to prison, or it's not even a factor on the table. And then after you complete the community service or the year period, they scrub it automatically. And so that's something Ohio could do. So, just more creative sentencing options or expounding on the sentencing options that are available.
I would also say a little wiggle room for people making mistakes. I would even think community service and probation is a privilege for people who have the resources to get to the locations that they have to get to. There's reliable transportation, that they have enough means, or their children are taken care of, that they can actually do community service, or the programs that they're supposed to do while also maintaining a job that may not have that flexibility. So I love Maryland's structure. I think it'd be great if they can do a program and then get it dismissed and call it a day. But also, are we thinking through the options for people who may need a little bit more consideration for how they can complete these programs or do things that they have to do to move on?
Yeah. Oh, and another thing that they did, to your point, because again, Maryland was what it was that the sheriff's office, and for misdemeanors, created their own community service program. So there wasn't the burden placed on paying for it or the transportation. So you go to the jail, do a couple hours, and it's done. And so again, I think going to the statute and looking at what we've criminalized, like disorderly conduct is one of those things I thought has always been overpunished and not necessarily a real thing. What is disorderly? It's something disturbing the peace and the public out in public. And so how many things were could have been disorderly conduct on opening day.
I was just thinking that. Oh my gosh.
And so again, look at what we're punishing. Does this really need to be behavior that's punishable? Because Kevin, you and I talked about this. The felony statute has grown exponentially, and I don't really think we've come up with that many new crimes. But to go from 146 felonies to 750, like, what have we done? What have we done as a people in terms of the acts? What are we really punishing? And so I think looking at what we're actually punishing, we could probably get the misdemeanor statute down to maybe a solid 10. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there, but that's a start.
Other questions out there?
It was a wonderful panel. Thank you so much. I had a question about reentry, and specifically, so I live in Lee County, and I work teach a poetry writing workshop in the day reporting program. So these are folks who are, go through drug court, get another option to do this other program. It seems to me that it's harder for the women in this program than it is for the men for a number of reasons. First of all, they did their using in this area, and they were often abused or whatever, and then they might even be asked to be in the same room with people that when they were out there, might have abused them or ripped them off or everything, And then also, they have to attend 12-step meetings, and they might also see people that they have history with, etc. And there's like 1 or 2 women's meetings a week, not enough to kind of make this work. And I'm wondering about that. I mean, I've been doing the program for a while. I've also, full disclosure, part of the team, so I teach at Oregon.
We did our training together.
Today I'm at Oregon. But anyway, I wonder if you could speak to that issue of like, it's troubling to me because I had even an event where a woman, I asked her to come and speak, and I said, oh, so-and-so will be speaking too. And she said, oh, I know that. And then immediately I was like, oh, you just don't think about that. Oh, I don't, because I'm naive about it, but I just wondered if you could speak to that a little about the specific pressures for women coming out in reentry.
For me, if I was going to some place where I had to speak in, it was an old place where I did drugs at. My mind now, there's nothing no one can say, do, or I could be around anyone that will ever take me back to that place. Not everybody's there. That's why I feel like mentorship, women helping women or men helping men, they need that one person or them people to talk to, because after a while, you should be able to go anywhere you want to without worrying about, oh God, I used to get high. I see a lot of people that I get high with now. And if they're still out there, hey, let me help you. And some of them like, no, Michelle, I ain't ready. Or some of them like, okay, I'm ready, but they're really not. But I embrace going around them now because I was them. So now let me help you, since I feel like I have the tools to help. Let me help.
One of the things we've talked about is that, going even back to the first question about these specialty courts, the intention is great, but who's at the table making the decision and creating the program? One of the things we talked about was one of the ways that OJPC is a little different from other organizations, and I said that we have the people impacted at the table making the decisions. And so reentry programs, diversion programs, are we telling people what they need, or are we hearing from them what would be beneficial to them? I've not been an addict. I've not struggled with addiction. I've not even had a criminal conviction and had to learn to navigate the world on the outside after going through a conviction. And so I can have all these great ideas about what's going to be helpful, but is it really helpful? I might need to hear from the person what they need. And so again, having that conversation, you have people say, maybe we shouldn't have programming in this area, because it's a trigger for me, because this is where I use. Not that we don't need the programming, but this might not be a good venue for me. And so having them at the table, having their voice heard, creating the reentry program, hearing what their barriers are.
You learn so much by working with clients who've experienced this firsthand. There's just things that I know about human trafficking that I don't even know if I'd be able to communicate because of how it's been told to me. But so many of my clients struggle to even go to NA or to AA because a part of that is to be honest and transparent and share your story, but they're not proud of their story because it's low street cred. So I didn't realize that until I worked with clients that they would not feel comfortable talking about their trafficking victimization because back from where they came from, it's not something to be proud of. So these are delicate nuances that how would I know coming out of law school what that means? But the more I communicate with clients, the more, then I can go to court, say, I don't think you understand what this is costing my client. Many of my clients who are incarcerated, we're trying to get them out, they want to be placed somewhere completely different. Like they've never even been to Columbus, they've never even been to Akron, for example. They're from Cincinnati. And I asked, like, are you okay with that? And they're like, I will not be okay if I go back to Cincinnati because my family relations are not great. They're not going to be the ones who pick me up. It's going to be someone I have a past with. And one way or another, they're going to find a way to convince me to go back to where I came from. And that's not what I need.
Oh my God. One of my passions is I want a recovery home, a reentry home, or some type of home in Cincinnati, in the outskirts, because all of the halfway houses, transitional houses, whatever, are all in bad communities. And how can you get a fresh start when you walk out to go to an appointment, you see a dealer or an old face that you know? Even though once you get to a point where those old faces and people won't matter, you have to first get your first stop to a place where you feel safe, where you feel comfortable, where you can express yourself, where you can talk about your triggers. Because if you don't know your triggers and what to do when a trigger comes up and how to express it and get it out and not act on it and go use. We need a place like that. Oh my! I want one so bad. There's a passion for me.
Well, I know we're getting close to the end here, or perhaps at the end, but we did start a couple minutes late. I just wonder if there's anybody like on Zoom who has a question, or anyone else in the real person audience. Otherwise, we can wrap things up.
I'll try and be consistent. I feel like it's hard to run the questions. I've sort of been marinating all this for a long time, and I prefer as a attorney, so I feel a lot of this. I recently heard Dr. Ruth Moore. She's actually a geographer, City University of New York. She's made it one of her missions in life to work on abolition as process, and she talks about how the prison system is a geography, that is something that has been built. And there are so many factors that we don't really consider. Like she told a story of a group of mothers who were trying to fight a prison being built in their city, and they eventually tied it back to the public health issue of pollution and asthma causing increased criminal behavior, and that's how they thought established there. I think the feeling that I have heard throughout this whole conversation is human connection. I feel like there's a real lack of human connection, there's a real loneliness epidemic in our society. And one of the concepts that she brought up was the idea of organized abandonment, how there are certain groups in our society who have been completely abandoned in an organized way, how so many of our different systems integrate and work together to leave people out. And I just wonder, I'd love to end on a note of hope, because I feel like it's so hard for people in this space all the time to just not go down. So I'm just wondering what each of your visions would be for creating sort of human connection and interrelationships that would make some of this better. And it could be a wild dream. That would ever happen, but what would be your vision for how things could be different?
Like I just said, I want a home, a place for women who have done a substantial amount of time coming out because it's hard, like she just said. When some of them been in there for 20, 30 years, they don't know nothing about a cell phone. They don't know how to work a computer. They don't know how to do a lot of things. And when you come home, we need structure, we need support, we need help, we need guidance. Without all that, we're going to fail. We're going to fail. And I would love to start I'm going to get one. I don't know how, but I'm going to get one. And it's like I said, it's going to be for women, because I have a friend who just came out. She did 35 years. And she calls me all the time. Well, how do you do this? Or how do you do that? And I was only gone for 13 years, but when I came home, I was like, whoa, my kids had to help me do everything. I still call and ask certain things. So we need help and support in order to achieve goals, to make it out here. Right. We got to have support. And that's how I feel like society can help people coming out of prison. Is solid support.
So my vision for hope and doing this work is to reach more people, and not just impacted people. So it's easy when for me to jump up and down about this, because my introduction to the criminal legal system was before I went to law school. It was in my neighborhood and through my family's involvement. And what I try to do is bridge the gap, because now I'm at the table as the defense attorney, but I'm also an impacted person, and get other people to be just as passionate and even more educated about it, even if they were not relatable. So you don't have to have had a family member incarcerated or been incarcerated person yourself to care about it. So reentry can be an economic issue, and not just about race and class. It's an economic, because when we're all working, the economy is better, right? Second chances. We all talk about second chances and forgiveness, and it's going to be preached tomorrow in somebody's sermon. And I challenge people, do you really believe in forgiveness if you're holding people to the worst thing they've ever done? And so again, you don't have to be a Christian, but this is what I thought I heard in your Bible, and so, or in your teachings. And so making it just an issue of relatability, and getting people, conservatives, on this side. We're a nonpartisan organization. We work with any and everybody. But again, getting them to change their perception of what they thought the experience was or what the issue was. Challenge them in a way that doesn't seem combative, but just, have you ever thought about it this way? About forgiveness and redemption, second chances, an issue of economics. Or how would you feel if you found yourself in that space? You would want somebody to really advocate and fight for you and believe in your innocence until proven guilty. And when you push it like that, or posture the questions that way, sometimes you see the light bulbs go off. And so that's my hope. If I can get one person to change what they thought the criminal legal experience was, who they thought a formerly incarcerated person was, or what it took to get involved in the legal system was, then I've accomplished a win. A win is a win, as LeBron says.
I would say for people who are not impacted and are not family members of people who have impacted, I think that we have a big responsibility, because it's not fair for people like Michelle or LaToya to always have to be the one to talk about this, because it's just not fair. It's very emotional and it's difficult. 1 in 6 people have a criminal record in Ohio. This is not just something that happens to certain people, a small portion of our population. We can look in any room and just count 1 in 6. So what that means is, if it's not you, that doesn't mean the person you're talking to, the person next to you, it's not them or their family member. We have a responsibility to talk about this without being uncomfortable, without being afraid, because you're afraid of something that you don't know. You're putting yourself in a box as someone who's not impacted. And if you care about this work, if you care about what people are experiencing, you hear things like this, it's not only about you knowing and you sitting on it. Talk to other people who are also not impacted, because you are the ambassadors who are able to talk to other people who don't know what this means. And that's very important, because it's not, again, something that happens to only a small group of people. You will also have a heightened level of responsibility for your community, your neighbors, your friends. And if we want this to get better in the future, like I said earlier, this starts from children. This starts from unstable communities who don't care about other people. you not learning about this or not wanting to get more educated, even if it's not your world experience, you're not helping this situation. If anything, your passive indifference is making it worse. This is a safe space, right?
Those are great. Oh yeah, that was awesome. So we can wrap up. If I could just share one thought too, is that when we were talking about like what people who are criminalized, what they need to do, and that's community service. And I just think how kind of backwards that is, because it's like, well, you need to do community service because you've taken something, but what about if people had something taken from them from the beginning, and that's why we're here? So in terms of dreaming, why don't we just start from, rather than thinking like what's legal and illegal, but like what do we owe each other as humans in the world, that we need each other. It's not possible to do this alone. So that was my little inspirational moment when I was hearing you all speak. But I just want to say thank you again to our panelists and to all of you for coming out. So thank you so much.
Thank you.